There we go. There we are. I'm a little louder. So as I shared with you via Grace Notes, via our electronic newsletter, Phoebe and I spent the past week cleaning up my folks' house in Vancouver, British Columbia. My father died a little over a year ago, and my mother became infirm around the same time. It became apparent sometime over the last year she'd not be able to return to that house. And so the work fell to us to clean up the evidence of 52 years of living in a home. We didn't complete the work, don't misunderstand me, but we started the work, and over the last 5 days, we single-handedly kept the Vancouver Recycling Center in business. We made multiple trips back and forth. And then partway through the week, we traveled over to Victoria, took the ferry across the channel to see our eldest son's girlfriend giving her senior recital. So a senior recital being when you're in music school, it's your capstone project, the final thing you do to determine whether you pass or fail, I guess. There's a lot of pressure in one note. It's a final thesis, basically, except it's a thesis that everybody who loves you comes to watch. In this case, his girlfriend is a vocal performer, and the senior recital was her singing classical music, mostly classical music, anyway. I'd like to wonder with you about those two experiences, cleaning up and recital, as a way of thinking about these amazing words we hear from 1 John this morning. See, what the Father has shown for us, that God has made us children of God. And then 1 John adds, and that is what we are. I'd like to think about these two experiences as a way of thinking about parenthood and childhood through 1 John's lens. What does it mean to be a parent? What does it mean to be a child? Now, before I go any further, I need to throw in a caveat or footnote or proviso and say I am aware that there are assuredly people here this morning who did not have a happy relationship with one or more parents. And there may be people here this morning who have a fraught relationship with a child. I want to name that and say I mourn that with you, and I stand in solidarity with you. That is a hard thing, and it's a big grief. My read is that 1 John is talking about parenthood and childhood as it ought to be, as it is in the kingdom. I seem to be cutting in and out for some reason. I wonder if I should switch to the handheld mic. Thank you. This instead. I think 1 John is talking about parenthood and childhood as it ought to be, as it is in the kingdom, as we all deserve it to be. And if you had a fractured relationship with a parent or a child, as you deserved for it to be. And the other parts of Scripture I'm going to draw on. There certainly are parts of Scripture where parents and children have a fractured relationship, but the other parts I'm going to draw on similarly assume that there is something holy going on. This is as it should be. So first, recital. Phoebe and I traveled to the University of Victoria to the recital hall and to see Isolde's senior recital. The recital hall in Victoria, most of University of Victoria and the University of British Columbia, was built during a time when people were very fond of exposed concrete.
This is from that school of architecture, the most accurately named school of architecture, which is brutalism. And this is a brutalist space. All of this concrete. For some reason, part of the audience is like on an angle to the stage. None of it really makes a great deal of sense, but it didn't matter. The evening was wonderful. We were delighted to be there. Isolde sang beautifully. She brought all these friends up on stage to sing with her and play with her, what in rock and roll we would call special guests, but for some reason you don't use that turn of phrase in the classical world. There was big applause. It was a wonderful evening. As we drove home, Phoebe's mom, Sue, talked about how good and healing it was to be in a context that had no purpose other than to be beautiful. That was the entire goal of the evening, was to create something beautiful and give it away to the world. There's no function, there was no practicality. It was simply beautiful. And in a world with so much hurt and so much acrimony and so much pain, that felt immensely healing. And it was wonderful as well to be witness to an event in which all of these people were full of hope for their future, for one another, for themselves. Phoebe and I have been to a lot of senior recitals, a lot of performances more broadly, and we've typically gone because a friend was performing, or because we ourselves were performing in some way. This was our first experience in which an adult was giving a performance and we were the next generation. We were the old people there to support them. And so I was thinking about like what it is to be a parent in this moment. We didn't make the performance happen. We weren't responsible for it. We were just there to delight. We're simply delighted in what we saw on stage. We're delighted for Isolde, and we're delighted to look over at Ami, her boyfriend, who was full of excitement and relief himself. When you love someone, you get nervous when they're doing something like that. We're just full of this joy as parents or as elders in this context. And I thought to myself, what if that's how God looks at you and me? What if God is looking upon you and feeling delight and feeling joy and feeling just this wonder at all the things that you're doing and all the things you are? What if that thing that Mr. Rogers said over and over again was right, that God says something similar? Mr. Rogers being one of God's great prophets. If God is saying all the time, I like you just the way that you are. It was never true. It was always a lie that God was an angry old man with a beard in the sky who was finding you wanting, who wanted you to be something else or someone else, who just thought you didn't measure up, who you had to do these things if you weren't going to be rejected. That was never true. God was always delighted in you. If Shakespeare was telling the truth, and all the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely giving a senior recital, then God is in the audience, laughing at the right time, weeping at the right time, applauding at the right time, standing up and cheering at the right time. At the end of the performance, God has a bouquet of flowers that God is going to bring backstage and give you this big hug and hand you the flowers and said, you were amazing. You did so good. I'm so proud of you. And then after that experience, we went back to Vancouver to put things in boxes. to sort out suits and neckties and magazines. Ahead of this experience I had of cleaning up the house, I'd wondered what it was going to be like. It's been over a year since my father died, and it took us a while to fess up that Mom was not going to be able to move back home. So the house has sat sort of dormant for a length of time. It's sort of this, I don't even know what language to use, this artifact of what things were like prior to this huge change in Mom's life and Dad's death. And I had wondered, I'd wondered if I would be paralyzed by grief when I got in there, if I would be like unable to throw out a paper clip because absolutely everything was a symbol of my father's absence and my mom's decline, if just everything would feel impossibly fraught. I also wondered, because I've talked to enough people who've done this work, if I would feel resentful. There are people who say, like, why did you leave me all this stuff to clean up? And while I did have some questions about some of the stuff that was left in the house. What did you intend to do with all of these jars of nails? What is the purpose of all of these National Geographics? In particular, why are there 3 copies of the October 1967 edition? What's on all these VHS tapes? What I actually mostly felt in the house was this combination of connection and gratitude. I felt this connection with my folks and with my late father in particular, because he had left Easter eggs all over the house. I don't mean literal bonbons, although there were some literal bonbons throughout the house. But I mean rather, the house was filled with these notes that he had written. My father would take small pieces of paper, and in his very distinctive handwriting, or sometimes using his typewriter, would indent a message, and then the piece of paper would go into a CD case, or into a book, or into some other thing, stamps that he was archiving. And I opened a mystery book, for instance, that explained when he finished the book. I completed reading this Dorothy Sayers book on March 12, 1979. It was a full moon. So there's this detail of the object. A number of the notes, however, had become detached from the object that they were offering comment on. They were just floating freely through the house. And some of our favorite notes were little pieces of paper. One of them sticks in my mind says, "To be taken care of," and then he hit return on the typewriter, "by someone else." There's another that says, this is the stand for a crystal bowl. Yetch. Apparently, I didn't like it, the crystal bowl. And perhaps my favorite was the piece of paper that simply said, "What is this for?" And so across, it's actually a handy piece of paper. You may want to consider making one for yourself. Across this experience, I felt this connection with my father, with his love for collection, for archiving, his whimsicality. It felt like our conversation was ongoing in some way. But in addition to that, I felt grateful that we were able to do this work for my late father and for my infirm mother. In the Jewish tradition, there is this word mitzvah, and a mitzvah is an action that is congruent with Torah. So it's something that's commanded by Torah, or it's something that's aligned with Torah. And so helping a person in need is a mitzvah, and giving money to a needy stranger is a mitzvah, and telling the truth, even though it's hard, is a mitzvah. One of the greatest mitzvahs you can do is to bury the dead. And that's not just because the dead need to be buried, but one of the greatest reasons, or reasons it's a great mitzvah, is that the dead can't pay you back. If you give money to a stranger in the street, they might seek you out someday and return the money to you. It's unlikely, but it is possible. Whereas the dead cannot find you and say thanks. They cannot write you a check. This is simply a good act that that you're called to do, and thus one of the most important. And I thought about that, that I have this opportunity, Phoebe and I have this opportunity to do this thing for my late father, for my infirm mother, that they can't reciprocate. And it's a particular gift to get to be able to do that. I was in someone's backyard a few years ago, and I somehow let it slip that I was a priest. And I often don't do that when I'm, say, picking up a child, because I just want to pick up the child and talk about the weather and leave. But somehow it came out that I was a priest, and the person who was there in the backyard started cross-examining me. And she said, if God is love, so other words that we hear from 1 John, elsewhere in 1 John, if God is love, why are you bothering going to church? Because God's going to love you anyway. You don't have to go. And that's an excellent question. Why are you here? There's all these other things you could be doing. You could be listening to NPR right now. You could be riding your bicycle. You could be at the coffee shop. You could just be sleeping in. The doors aren't locked. Why are you here? Well, that question makes sense. That question that person asked me makes sense for so long as we agree that what we're doing here is a transaction, albeit a pointless one, but a transaction nonetheless, probably driven by guilt or shame. We're here in the hopes of getting God to like us. But if God is like that audience member in the recital, if God is indeed love, then God is delighting in us already. And I want to suggest that if we conceptualize God that way, as the God who is love, the God who is delighting in us, not the God who requires a transaction from us, then this question, why are you in church, even though God will love you if you don't come to church, stops making sense, to borrow a line from Talking Heads. Consider someone whom you love and whom you know loves you. It might be a parent, it might be a spouse, it might be a close friend, it might be a teacher, it might be someone in your life, a person who loves you and whom you love in return. And now imagine someone coming to you and saying, why are you giving that person a present even though they'll love you if you don't? That's an absurd question. You're not giving them the present in the hopes that they will love you. It's not a transaction. You are giving them a present as an outward and visible sign of your love. You are giving them a present because it's a delight to do so. I mean, if you think about giving a present to a child in particular, it's a joy to be the one giving that gift to another person. You're doing this because it's something that in total freedom you are choosing to do. I don't have to go to church. I get to go to church. I don't have to engage in a mitzvah. I get to engage in a mitzvah. I don't have to clean up my folks' house. I get to clean up my folks' house. There is suddenly this freedom, this joy, this this reciprocal delight that we are invited to act in. We call what we talk about here on Sunday morning good news. And what if it really is good news? What if God is there in the audience watching you with joy, watching you with love? What if God is saying, this is my child, the beloved, in you I am well pleased? And what if, empowered by that delight, we are deeply free to respond, to get to act in service? See how much the Father has loved us, that he has called us children of God. And that is what we are.